Race Drivin, released in 1992 for the Sega Genesis from Tenjin and an adaptation of the 1990 Atari Games arcade game of the same name, itself a sequel to the much more awesome-sounding Hard Drivin from 1989. And you know what? It's a good thing we looked at Hard Drivin for the Genesis before getting to this game, because Race Drivin is pretty much the same game, but with more stuff. I mean, it looks the same, it sounds the same, it plays the same, it chugs the same. There's more stuff, but if you've played Hard Drivin, you've played Race Drivin, and that's pretty much the entire review. I could end it here, but let's pad this out a little further to give it a few minutes or something. I don't know. Fuck. Now, to summarize, the visuals are rudimentary 3D graphics with a choppy frame rate, but is an otherwise marginally playable conversion with some solid controls. I'd go so far to say the controls in this Genesis port is much more stable than those of the arcade. I mean, the driving, while not great, isn't completely horrible. You have a better grip on your vehicle. It's less prone to sliding all over the place, though honestly that's not really saying much. Really, despite the less than stellar frame rate, it'd be a stretch to say it plays well, so let's just go with it plays well enough. And that mostly holds true with Race Drivin, which again is just Hard Drivin with more stuff. Even though the first screen mentions being developed by another team, it's mostly an expanded version of the first port with more options and stuff. You now have a choice of 1 to 3 cars to drive, each with differing performances, as well as unique HUDs for each car, which is a nice touch. In addition to Hard Drivin's original track, there's also an additional super stunt track with more crazy stunts, as well as an autocross track for less fancy stunt work. Or you could actually create your own tracks with the custom track builder, or go for something completely random, which is something you could do. This is actually a nice little surprise to be able to actually assemble your own little track and drive it around. Sadly, there's no means of saving your creation, or at least I haven't found one, but the novelty is there for the lulls, like making a track with a whole bunch of loops and finding out you just go underneath the other loop, like there's nothing there. So, here's another track that I made. I call this the Frame Killer. Race Drivin, despite the added content, is pretty much the same game as Hard Drivin, which means its performance is pretty much on par with that of the previous game, which means when playing on the autocross or speed segments of the original track, the frame rate is somewhat tolerable. Not smooth, but bearable. But introduce another large object or obstacle on screen, and that's when it starts to chug. Introduce a whole bunch of obstacles, and the poor bastard starts to really fall apart to the point of being virtually unplayable. This is where me thinks trying to bring 16-bit consoles a super stunt track is a bad idea. How bad? Well, there's supposed to be a hill here, and in fact, there was a hill here in the arcade original. And now there is no hill, so you have this barn that's floating in the air and you just fall off the track and you die. Pound! Fantastic. Also, just so I'm being completely fair, the Super Nintendo version of Race Driving did have a hill on this track, so score 1 for the Super Nintendo. But just the 1, because that game still sucks. There's a hill in the fucking Game Boy version. So here's the deal. Race Drivin on the Genesis is Hard Drivin on the Genesis with more stuff, which makes it only a marginal upgrade over the previous game due to having more stuff. That's about all you have. More stuff doesn't necessarily mean better performance. If anything, it only further kills the frame rate with the stuff that it's trying to do, particularly with the new stunt track. If you were to avoid that and keep with the much simpler tracks, the game will run just fine. Anything more than that, I don't know. If that doesn't convince you, I don't know what else. So with that in mind, if you didn't care for Hard Drivin, Race Drivin isn't going to change your mind. And once again, if you're interested in giving Race Drivin a shot, finding a means of playing the arcade original is the best way to do it. I know it's on the 3rd Midway Arcade Treasures disc for the PS2 and other consoles of the time, and beyond that, you're on your own.